The space station Meridian hung like a silver needle against the star-scattered darkness of the void. Built at the crossroads of three major trade routes, it served as both a diplomatic hub and a memorial to those who had died defending humanity's expansion into the galaxy. The station's central ring housed embassies, trading posts, and residential quarters for thousands of beings from dozens of species. But at its heart, in the most protected section, stood something that few non-humans understood: the tomb of the unknown defender. Marcus Chen had been standing guard at the tomb for 6 hours. His boots were polished to mirror brightness, his dress uniform pressed to perfection, and his rifle held at precise ceremonial position. Not once had he moved from his spot, not even to blink longer than necessary. The young Marine had volunteered for this duty, knowing what it meant to stand watch over the memorial that honored every human who had died protecting others in the galaxy. The tomb itself was simple, yet powerful. A black granite rectangle sat beneath a dome of transparent aluminum, allowing visitors to see the endless stars beyond. Engraved on its surface were the words, "Here lies a defender of humanity, known but to God." Beneath those words, thousands of names scrolled continuously in golden letters. Every human who had died in service to others, whether military or civilian, whether in great battles or small acts of heroism. Around the memorial hall, holographic displays showed scenes from across human space: children playing on colony worlds, merchants conducting peaceful trade, scientists making discoveries that benefited all species. These images reminded visitors why these people had died, not for conquest or glory, but to protect the innocent and preserve the peace that allowed civilization to flourish. Marcus had memorized every name that scrolled across the tomb's surface. His own grandfather's name was there: Thomas Chen, who had died evacuating civilians from a mining station under pirate attack. His sister's name was there too: Captain Sarah Chen, killed while defending a refugee convoy from slavers. The Chen family had given much to humanity's cause, and Marcus considered it an honor to continue their tradition of service. The memorial hall stayed open around the clock, welcoming visitors from all species who wished to pay their respects. Most came quietly, observing the solemn atmosphere. They understood that this place was sacred to humans, even if they didn't fully grasp why humans honored their dead with such ceremony. Some species found it strange that humans would waste resources on memorials for the deceased. Others respected the tradition but practiced their own forms of remembrance. Today had been busier than usual. A diplomatic conference was taking place on the station, bringing together representatives from the major powers in this region of space. Marcus had seen ambassadors from the Keth Republic, their scaled green skin gleaming under the soft lights. A delegation of Vorthon traders had passed through, their tall, thin forms moving with their characteristic grace. Even some of the reclusive Nexari had made an appearance, their pale faces hidden behind ceremonial masks. Each visitor had shown proper respect. They spoke in whispers, if at all. They moved slowly through the hall, reading the displays and observing the scrolling names. Some left small tokens of respect: flowers from their homeworlds, crystals that caught the light, or simple written messages of gratitude. Marcus appreciated their understanding, even if their own cultures handled death differently. The afternoon shift change was still 2 hours away when Marcus heard heavy footsteps approaching. The sound echoed differently than the soft-soled shoes worn by most diplomatic visitors. These were military boots, striking the floor with aggressive precision. Marcus didn't turn to look. His duty required him to face forward, maintaining his vigil over the tomb. But he could hear multiple people approaching, and their pace suggested urgency or anger. "This is ridiculous," a loud voice declared in heavily accented English. "We are being kept waiting while the humans hold their little ceremony. I have more important things to do than watch some boy play soldier." Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he remained at attention. Part of his training had covered dealing with disrespectful visitors. The protocol was clear: maintain position, ignore provocations, and only respond if directly addressed by someone with proper authority. His job was to honor the dead, not to engage in arguments with the living. "Colonel Volkov, perhaps we should return later," suggested a quieter voice. "The memorial has its own schedule and we can arrange a private viewing if needed." "Nonsense," the first voice replied. "I am Colonel Viktor Volkov of the Russian Colonial Defense Force." I do not wait for anyone, especially not for some ceremonial nonsense. That guard will acknowledge my presence with proper military courtesy, or I will file a formal complaint with Station Command. Marcus could see the group now, in his peripheral vision. 5 people in military uniforms, led by a stocky man with graying hair and the insignia of a colonel. The man's face was red with irritation, and he carried himself with the arrogance of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. Behind him stood 4 younger officers, clearly uncomfortable with their commander's behavior but unwilling to challenge him directly. The colonel stopped directly in front of Marcus, close enough that the guard could smell the man's cologne and see the anger in his pale blue eyes. For a moment, the 2 military men faced each other, one standing perfectly still in respect for the dead, the other radiating impatience and entitlement. "You there, soldier?" Colonel Volkov barked. "Do you know who I am? I am a colonel in the Colonial Defense Force, and I demand proper military courtesy. You will salute me immediately." Marcus remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the tomb before him. His training was clear about this situation. He was not to break his ceremonial position for anyone except in case of emergency or direct orders from his chain of command. A foreign officer, regardless of rank, had no authority over him while he stood guard at humanity's most sacred memorial. The colonel's face grew redder. The moment of confrontation had arrived, and neither man was prepared to back down. Colonel Viktor Volkov had not expected to be ignored. In his 25 years of military service across 3 different colonial worlds, no soldier had ever failed to acknowledge his rank. His career had been built on strict discipline and unwavering respect for the chain of command. Junior officers snapped to attention when he entered a room. Enlisted personnel scrambled to fulfill his orders. Even civilian contractors showed him the deference his position demanded. But this young Marine continued to stare straight ahead, as motionless as a statue. The guard's rifle remained at ceremonial present, his posture perfect, his breathing so controlled it was barely visible. It was as if Volkov didn't exist at all. "Did you hear me, soldier?" Volkov stepped closer, his voice rising. "I said salute." "That is a direct order from a superior officer." Behind him, Major Petrov shifted uncomfortably. The younger officer had served under Volkov for 3 years and had seen his commander's temper many times. But this situation felt different. They were guests on the station, attending a peace conference. Creating an incident at humanity's most sacred memorial would have serious diplomatic consequences. "Sir," Petrov said quietly, "perhaps we should speak with the station commander about proper protocols." "Quiet!" Volkov snapped without taking his eyes off Marcus. "I will not be lectured about protocols by my own subordinates. This guard will show proper respect, or he will face the consequences." Marcus could feel sweat beginning to form under his collar, but his training held firm. 3 months of preparation had gone into earning this assignment. He had studied the history of every name on the memorial. He had practiced the ceremonial movements until they became second nature. He had memorized the regulations that governed his conduct while on duty. Regulation 12.4 was absolutely clear. The tomb guard will maintain position and bearing regardless of external distractions. The guard will not acknowledge any person except in response to proper ceremonial protocol or emergency situations. Colonel Volkov might outrank him in the Colonial Defense Force, but Marcus answered to the Memorial Guard Command, and their authority superseded all others within this sacred space. The other visitors in the hall had begun to notice the confrontation. A group of Keth diplomats watched with interest, their reptilian features showing curiosity about this human conflict. Some Vorthan traders whispered among themselves, clearly uncomfortable with the raised voices in such a solemn place. Even the Nexari observers had turned their masked faces toward the developing scene. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, the station's chief anthropologist, had been giving a tour to some visiting academics when the shouting began. She recognized the signs of a serious diplomatic incident in the making. The humans took their memorial traditions very seriously, and any attempt to interfere with the tomb guard was considered a grave insult. She quickly sent her tour group away and began recording the encounter with her personal device. If this escalated, there would need to be an accurate record of events. "You are making a fool of yourself, Marine," Volkov continued, his accent growing thicker with anger. "Do you think your little ceremony makes you special? Do you think standing still like a robot makes you some kind of hero?" He gestured dismissively at the tomb. These people are dead. They cannot see your pretty uniform or your perfect posture. But I am alive, I am here, and I am your superior officer. For the first time, Marcus felt his composure waver slightly. The colonel's words struck at something deep inside him. This wasn't just about military protocol anymore. This was about the meaning behind his duty, the purpose of the memorial, and the respect owed to those who had died protecting others. The names continued to scroll across the tomb's surface. Thomas Chen, Sarah Chen, Lieutenant Michael Rodriguez, who had died shielding wounded civilians from an explosion, Captain Lisa Park, killed while evacuating a hospital ship, Sergeant David Smith, who had held a mountain pass alone for 6 hours to buy time for refugee convoys to escape. Thousands of names, thousands of stories, thousands of people who had chosen duty over safety, service over self-interest. Perhaps, said a new voice, the colonel would benefit from understanding why this young man takes his duty so seriously. Everyone turned to see Commander Helen Morrison approaching. The station's military liaison was a veteran of the frontier wars, her left arm replaced with a prosthetic after losing it in battle. Her uniform bore the ribbons of someone who had seen real combat, and her expression showed none of the diplomatic politeness usually required in such situations. Commander Morrison, Volkov said, straightening slightly. While he outranked her in the Colonial Defense Force, they were on her station, and protocol required basic courtesy. I was just instructing this guard on proper military etiquette. He has failed to salute a superior officer. Morrison's smile was cold as deep space. I see. And in your understanding of military etiquette, Colonel, what is the appropriate response when a guard is performing ceremonial duties at a memorial for the war dead? Military courtesy takes precedence over ceremony, Volkov replied confidently. A soldier's first duty is to his superiors, not to some symbolic gestures for people who are no longer alive to appreciate them. Several of the alien observers exchanged glances. Even species that didn't practice ancestor worship could sense the tension building in the room. Dr. Hayes continued recording, knowing that this conversation would be studied by xenologists for years to come, as an example of human cultural conflicts. Interesting perspective, Morrison said. Tell me, Colonel, are you familiar with the regulations governing memorial guards? Volkov waved his hand dismissively. Local regulations cannot supersede basic military hierarchy. A colonel gives orders, and junior enlisted personnel follow them. This is fundamental to any proper military organization. Morrison nodded slowly. I see. And what, in your experience, is the penalty for deserting one's post while on guard duty? Desertion? Volkov laughed harshly. Who said anything about desertion? I simply asked for a salute, basic military courtesy that any proper soldier would provide automatically. But if he saluted you, Morrison continued, he would be required to come to attention, present arms, and acknowledge your presence. That would constitute abandoning his ceremonial post. The penalty for abandoning guard duty at this memorial is court-martial and dismissal from service. For the first time, Volkov looked uncertain. He glanced at Major Petrov, who was studying the floor with great interest. None of his other subordinates met his eyes. Surely you're exaggerating, Volkov said. No military organization would court-martial a soldier for showing respect to a superior officer. Morrison's expression remained neutral, but her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Colonel, that young Marine has been standing in that exact position for over 6 hours. In 4 more hours, he will be relieved by the next guard, who will stand motionless for another 8 hours. They do this every day around the clock, year after year. They do it because they understand something that perhaps you do not. The confrontation had reached a turning point, but neither side was ready to back down. Marcus continued his vigil, even as the weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present. Commander Morrison walked slowly around the tomb, her prosthetic arm gleaming under the soft lights. Each step was measured, deliberate, like a teacher preparing to deliver a lesson that would change everything. The alien observers watched with growing fascination as this human drama unfolded in their most sacred space. Tell me, Colonel, Morrison said, stopping beside one of the holographic displays. What do you see when you look at this memorial? Volkov glanced around impatiently. I see an expensive piece of architecture dedicated to people who are no longer alive to benefit from it. Resources that could have been better spent on equipment for living soldiers. Morrison nodded as if she had expected this answer. And what do you see, Dr. Hayes? The anthropologist stepped forward, still recording. I see the physical manifestation of humanity's deepest values, the willingness to sacrifice for others, the belief that some things are worth dying for, and the conviction that those sacrifices should be remembered and honored. Philosophical nonsense, Volkov muttered. The dead are dead. Fancy ceremonies don't change that. Morrison touched the surface of the tomb and the scrolling names paused. With a gesture, she highlighted one entry. Captain Elena Vasquez. Killed defending Kepler Station from pirate attack. Saved 847 civilians. The holographic display shifted to show images of a space battle, a small ship throwing itself between pirates and a civilian transport. Captain Vasquez was 26 years old, Morrison said quietly. She had been married for exactly 3 months. Her husband was one of the civilians she saved. After her death, he petitioned to have her buried on Earth, but she had left specific instructions. She wanted to be cremated and her ashes scattered in space. Among the stars she had died protecting, she gestured, and another name appeared. Sergeant James Murphy. Killed holding defensive position during evacuation of New Dublin. Saved 1 in 200 colonists. The display showed a man in combat armor, standing alone against overwhelming odds while transport ships lifted off behind him. Sergeant Murphy was supposed to rotate home after that mission, Morrison continued. His daughter was graduating from university. Instead, he volunteered to stay behind and cover the evacuation. His last transmission was, "Tell my little girl I'm proud of her." Volkov shifted uncomfortably, but his expression remained skeptical. These are just stories. Every military has heroes. That doesn't justify turning a guard into a statue. Morrison smiled sadly. You still don't understand. This memorial isn't just about our heroes, Colonel. It's about what makes humans different from every other species in the galaxy. She activated a new display, showing a star map of human space. Thousands of points of light marked colonies, trading posts, and stations. Humans have been in space for less than 2 centuries. Most species take millennia to spread across a single star system. We've established ourselves in over 300 systems in that time. Do you know why? Superior technology, Volkov said automatically. Better ships, better weapons, better organization. Wrong. The voice came from an unexpected source. One of the Keth diplomats had approached, his scales shifting color in a pattern that indicated deep respect. Honored humans, may this one speak? Morrison nodded. Of course, Ambassador Thesh. The Keth's translator caller rendered his hissing speech into perfect English. This one has studied human expansion for 3 decades. Human technology is good but not superior to Keth technology. Human ships are fast but not faster than Vorthon vessels. Human weapons are effective, but not more powerful than Nexari designs. He gestured toward the tomb with one clawed hand. What makes humans unique is this. They die for strangers. No other species does this with such consistency. Keth protect Keth. Vorthon protect Vorthon. Nexari protect Nexari. But humans die for anyone who cannot protect themselves. Major Petrov found his voice for the first time. That's quite an observation, Ambassador. This one has seen human merchants die defending Keth cargo ships from pirates. This one has witnessed human soldiers sacrifice themselves to save Vorthon civilians from natural disasters. Human medics have died treating plague victims on worlds where no human had ever lived. The Keth scales shifted to deeper blue, indicating profound emotion. Other species trade with humans not because they fear human weapons, but because they trust human promises. Dr. Hayes nodded enthusiastically. That's exactly right. Ambassador Thesh has identified the core of human exceptionalism. It's not our intelligence or our technology, it's our willingness to extend our definition of tribe to include everyone. Volkov looked around the room, seeing the alien faces watching him with something approaching pity. This is all very touching, but it doesn't change military protocol. That guard should salute when ordered to do so by a superior officer. Should he? Morrison's voice had grown cold again. Let me ask you something, Colonel. Have you ever wondered why humans are allowed to maintain armed guards on diplomatic stations? Why other species permit human military personnel to carry weapons in neutral space? Because we negotiated those rights in the various treaties, Volkov replied, though he sounded less certain. Because they trust us, Morrison corrected. They trust that human guards will protect everyone on this station, regardless of species or political affiliation. They trust that if pirates attack, human soldiers will fight just as hard to save a Keth child as a human child. They trust that our guards take their duty seriously enough to maintain absolute discipline, She gestured toward Marcus, who continued his motionless vigil. That young man has been standing there for 6 hours. In that time, he has not moved his feet, adjusted his grip on his rifle, or taken his eyes off the tomb. He hasn't scratched an itch, wiped away sweat, or acknowledged any of the hundreds of people who have passed through this hall. Do you know why? Because he's following orders, Volkov said. But his voice lacked conviction. Because he understands that his discipline honors every person whose name is on that tomb, Morrison replied. Because he knows that thousands of beings from dozens of species watch human guards and judge whether they can be trusted. Because he believes that some things are more important than personal comfort or even military hierarchy. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the station's life support systems. The names continued their eternal scroll across the tomb's surface, each one representing a life given in service to others. Marcus remained at his post, breathing so quietly he might have been carved from stone. Colonel Volkov stared at the young Marine, and for the first time, something like doubt crept into his expression. The weight of all those watching eyes, human and alien alike, seemed to press down on him. He had come here expecting simple obedience to his rank and authority. Instead, he had found something far more complex and challenging. The confrontation was about to take a dramatic turn. The silence stretched for nearly a full minute before Colonel Volkov spoke again. His voice had lost some of its earlier certainty, but his stubborn pride remained intact. This is all very philosophical, he said, but it doesn't change the basic facts. I am a colonel. He is a private, and military hierarchy exists for good reasons. Order and discipline are what separate professional soldiers from armed mobs. Commander Morrison studied him with the patient expression of someone who had dealt with difficult officers before. You're absolutely right about hierarchy, Colonel. It's essential to military effectiveness. But let me ask you this. What happens when two different hierarchies come into conflict? I don't follow. Morrison activated another display showing the organizational chart of the Memorial Guard Command. Private Chen answers to Sergeant Williams, who answers to Lieutenant Torres, who answers to Captain Peterson, who answers to me. I answer to Admiral Harrison, who answers to the Secretary of Defense, who answers to the civilian government of humanity. That's his chain of command while he's on guard duty. She paused, letting this information sink in. Now you're a colonel in the Colonial Defense Force. Your chain of command goes through General Kozlov to the Colonial Authority, then to the same civilian government. But here's the crucial point. You're not in his chain of command and he's not in yours. Volkov frowned. All human military forces operate under unified command structure. A colonel outranks a private regardless of their specific unit assignments. Under normal circumstances, yes, Morrison agreed. But these aren't normal circumstances. Private Chen is performing a ceremonial function that has been specifically protected by treaty and regulation. While he's on duty at this memorial, he takes orders only from the Memorial Guard Command. Any interference with that duty, even by superior officers, is considered a violation of the sacred trust that allows humans to maintain this memorial on neutral ground. Dr. Hayes stepped forward with her recording device. Colonel, may I share something from my research? I've been studying human military traditions across different cultures, and there's a fascinating pattern. Volkov nodded grudgingly, clearly hoping for someone who might support his position. Every successful human military organization has developed some form of absolute duty that transcends normal hierarchy. Dr. Hayes continued. The guards at Buckingham Palace who cannot be distracted by tourists. The sentries at the tomb of the unknown soldier who maintain their vigil, regardless of weather or circumstances. The honor guards who protect fallen comrades even when under fire. She gestured toward Marcus. These traditions seem inefficient from a purely practical standpoint, but they serve a crucial psychological function. They demonstrate that some commitments are so sacred that even military authority cannot override them. This creates a foundation of moral certainty that makes human soldiers exceptionally reliable in extreme situations. Ambassador Thesh spoke again, his translator rendering careful emphasis. This one has studied many species' military forces. Most collapse when officers begin competing for power instead of focusing on mission. Human forces remain stable because lower ranks trust that orders come from genuine authority, not personal ambition. This trust exists because humans demonstrate absolute commitment to principles that cannot be compromised. You're saying that breaking this guard's discipline would somehow undermine all human military effectiveness? Volkov asked skeptically. Not directly, Morrison replied, but it would send a message about what humans really value. If we break our own sacred commitments for convenience, why should anyone trust our other promises? The Nexari observer, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward, her pale face visible beneath her ceremonial mask. When she spoke, her voice carried an unusual electronic harmony that indicated deep respect. Honored humans, this one requests permission to share historical perspective. Morrison nodded. Please, Observer Kryn. The Nexari have existed for 50,000 of your years, Kryn said, her words carefully measured. We have seen civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy. Most follow predictable patterns. Rapid expansion followed by internal conflict as different groups compete for resources and power. She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. Humans have been in space for such a short time that other species initially dismissed them as another young race that would burn itself out within a few centuries. But humans display behavioral patterns we have never observed before, such as, Dr. Hayes asked eagerly. Sacrifice for abstract principles, Kryn replied. Most species will die for family, for territory, for resources. Humans die for ideas, justice, freedom, honor, the protection of strangers. This makes human behavior unpredictable in traditional political calculations. She gestured toward the tomb. This memorial represents something that concerns many elder species. The possibility that humans might expand their protection to include everyone in the galaxy. Not through conquest, but through voluntary commitment to universal principles. Colonel Volkov looked around the room, seeing the faces of various species all focused on him, with something approaching anticipation. You're all watching to see what I'll do, he realized. Indeed, Ambassador Thesh confirmed. This one's government has been debating whether to request human protection for Keth colony worlds in the disputed border regions. The decision may depend on whether human military discipline truly extends to protecting principles over personal authority. The weight of diplomatic consequences began to settle on Volkov's shoulders. What had started as a simple demand for military courtesy was becoming a test case for humanity's reliability as an interstellar partner. Major Petrov cleared his throat nervously. Sir, perhaps we should consider the broader implications here. The peace conference downstairs is discussing military cooperation agreements that could affect millions of people. Volkov turned to look at Marcus again. The young Marine hadn't moved a muscle during the entire conversation. His breathing remained controlled, his posture perfect, his attention focused entirely on the tomb and its scrolling names. Sweat had beaded on his forehead, but he made no move to wipe it away. How long has he been standing there? Volkov asked quietly. Morrison checked her chronometer. 6 hours and 47 minutes. His shift ends in 1 hour and 13 minutes. And if I continue to demand that he salute me, then he will continue to ignore you, Morrison replied simply. He will stand there until his replacement arrives, no matter what anyone says or does. That is his duty, and he will not abandon it. Volkov stared at the young guard for a long moment, and something fundamental began to shift in his understanding. This wasn't about military hierarchy or personal pride. This was about something much larger and more important than any individual officer's ego. The moment of decision had arrived, and everyone in the room could feel it. Colonel Volkov felt the eyes of the galaxy watching him. Representatives from species that had existed for millennia were observing his next decision, weighing whether humanity could be trusted with the responsibilities that came with galactic citizenship. The implications were staggering, but his pride still burned like a fire in his chest. This is absurd, he said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. I cannot allow my authority to be undermined by a private who refuses to follow basic military protocol. Commander Morrison's expression remained neutral, but her tone grew more serious. Colonel, let me be very clear about what will happen if you continue this course of action. Every word of this conversation is being recorded by multiple parties. Dr. Hayes is documenting it for historical research. The alien observers are reporting to their governments. Station security has been monitoring the situation since you raised your voice in a sacred space. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. If you force a confrontation with a memorial guard, you will be creating an interstellar incident. The story will spread throughout human space and beyond. Every species will know that a Russian colonel tried to break a human honor guard, because his ego was more important than respecting the war dead. Volkov's face paled, but his stubborn nature reasserted itself. You're threatening me with propaganda? With political consequences? I am a military officer following proper protocol. No, sir, said a new voice from behind them. You're not. Everyone turned to see General Patricia Morrison entering the memorial hall. The two-star general was Commander Morrison's sister, though they rarely served in the same sector. Her presence meant that this situation had already escalated far beyond a simple diplomatic incident. Colonel Volkov snapped to attention automatically, as did Major Petrov and the other junior officers. General Morrison, ma'am? At ease, Colonel. General Morrison's voice carried the weight of decades of command experience. I was conducting a routine inspection of the station when I received a rather disturbing report. Something about a Colonial Defense Force officer attempting to interfere with Memorial Guard duties. Ma'am, I was simply requesting proper military courtesy from a subordinate. Colonel, the general interrupted, are you familiar with Colonial Defense Force Regulation 847C? Volkov hesitated. No, ma'am, not specifically. General Morrison pulled out a tablet and read aloud. No Colonial Defense Force personnel shall interfere with, interrupt, or attempt to command memorial guards while said guards are performing ceremonial duties. Violation of this regulation shall result in immediate court-martial proceedings and possible dismissal from service. The blood drained from Volkov's face. Ma'am, I was not informed that such a regulation existed. Ignorance of regulations is not an acceptable excuse for a colonel, the general replied coldly, especially when those regulations exist to protect one of humanity's most sacred traditions. She walked over to stand beside Marcus, who continued his motionless vigil. Private Chen, how long have you been on duty? 7 hours and 12 minutes, ma'am, Marcus replied without moving his eyes from the tomb. And how much longer until your relief arrives? 48 minutes, ma'am, General Morrison nodded approvingly. Carry on, Private. She turned back to Volkov and her expression was granite hard. Colonel, that young man has been standing at attention for over 7 hours. During that time, he has not moved from his position, acknowledged any distractions, or broken his concentration for even a moment. He represents the absolute best of human military discipline and dedication. The general gestured toward the alien observers. These representatives have been watching our exchange with great interest. They're trying to determine whether humans can be trusted to honor their commitments even when it's inconvenient, or challenges their personal preferences. Ambassador Thesh stepped forward again. Honored General, this one's government has been very impressed by human reliability in previous agreements, but some members of the Keth High Council have expressed concerns about human tendency toward internal conflict. What kind of concerns? General Morrison asked. Whether human military leaders can subordinate personal pride to larger principles, Thesh replied diplomatically. Some believe that humans become unreliable when their authority is questioned, even in symbolic ways. Observer Kryn of the Nexari added her own perspective. The Nexari Collective has been monitoring this situation as a test case. If human officers cannot respect their own sacred traditions, how can they be expected to honor agreements with alien species? The weight of galactic politics settled heavily on Colonel Volkov's shoulders. What had begun as a simple assertion of military rank had become a referendum on humanity's trustworthiness as an interstellar partner. Dr. Hayes continued her recording, knowing that this moment would be studied by xenologists and historians for generations. General, if I may, this situation represents a perfect example of what makes human military culture unique. The willingness to subordinate individual authority to collective principles. General Morrison nodded. Dr. Hayes is correct. Colonel Volkov, you have a choice to make. You can continue demanding that Private Chen break his sacred duty to acknowledge your rank. If you do, you will be court-martialed, dismissed from service, and remembered throughout the galaxy as the man who proved humans cannot be trusted to honor their own commitments. She paused, letting the full impact of her words settle. Or you can demonstrate that human military officers understand something more important than personal pride, the value of absolute commitment to duty. Volkov looked around the room again. The alien observers watched him with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. His own subordinates studied the floor, clearly hoping their commander would make the right choice. Dr. Hayes continued recording, preserving every moment for posterity. but it was Marcus who finally broke through Volkov's resistance. The young Marine remained perfectly still, honoring the memory of every human who had died protecting others. His dedication was absolute, his commitment unwavering, his discipline perfect. For the first time, Volkov began to understand what everyone else in the room already knew. This wasn't about military hierarchy at all. It was about something far more profound and important than any individual officer's authority. The moment of truth had arrived, and Colonel Volkov's next words would determine not only his own fate, but potentially humanity's future relationships with dozens of alien species. Colonel Viktor Volkov stood in silence for what felt like an eternity, though his chronometer showed only 30 seconds had passed. The weight of galactic observation pressed down on him, but it was something else entirely that finally broke through his stubborn pride. The names scrolling endlessly across the tomb's surface. He began to read them, really read them. For the first time since entering the memorial hall, Captain Maria Santos killed defending civilian evacuation convoy from pirate attack. Lieutenant David Kim died protecting medical facility during orbital bombardment. Sergeant Elena Volkov killed covering retreat of wounded comrades during Battle of Kepler Prime. Volkov's breath caught in his throat. Elena Volkov, he whispered, staring at the name as it scrolled past. His sister's name. His little sister who had joined the Marines against their father's wishes, who had died 3 years ago in a battle he had only read about in casualty reports. Did you know her? General Morrison asked quietly, having noticed his reaction. My sister, Volkov said, his voice barely audible. Sergeant Elena Volkov, she was a communications specialist, volunteered for a dangerous mission to establish contact with stranded civilians. His hands trembled slightly. I never knew they had put her name here. Commander Morrison's expression softened. Every human who dies in service to others earns a place on this memorial, regardless of rank or circumstances. Your sister's sacrifice saved 47 civilians who were trapped behind enemy lines. Volkov stared at the tomb with new eyes. This wasn't just a monument to abstract heroes from distant battles. These were real people with families, with dreams, with people who missed them every day. And one of them was his own blood. I argued with her, he said, speaking more to himself than to anyone else, before her last deployment. I told her she was wasting her talents on dangerous assignments. Said she should transfer to a safe position in administration. He swallowed hard. She told me that some things were more important than safety. Marcus had been listening, though he gave no outward sign. The name Elena Volkov was one he knew well from his memorization studies. She had died holding a communication relay point while civilians evacuated under heavy fire. Her last transmission had been coordinates for an enemy artillery position that was threatening the evacuation ships. Dr. Hayes lowered her recording device respectfully. Colonel, your sister exemplified the highest ideals of human service. According to the mission reports, she maintained her position for over an hour after being mortally wounded, ensuring that the evacuation was completed successfully. She always was stubborn, Volkov said with a broken laugh. Even as a child, once she decided something was right, nothing could change her mind. He looked up at Marcus with something approaching understanding. She would have stood guard here, wouldn't she? If she had been given this assignment, she would have stayed at her post no matter what anyone said. Yes, sir, General Morrison replied, just like Private Chen is doing now. Volkov walked closer to the tomb, reading more names as they scrolled past. Each one represented a story, a sacrifice, a family somewhere mourning their loss. The scale of it was overwhelming, but also strangely comforting. Elena hadn't died alone or forgotten. She was part of something larger, something that honored the best of human nature. Ambassador Thesh watched this transformation with great interest. In his diplomatic career, he had seen many species struggle with the concept of honor. Most understood duty to family or tribe, but humans had somehow expanded that concept to include complete strangers. It was this quality that made them such valuable allies and such dangerous enemies. Honored Colonel, Thesh said carefully, this one observes that you are experiencing emotional response to the memorial. May this one ask if understanding has changed? Volkov turned to face the Keth diplomat, and for the first time since entering the hall, his expression showed genuine humility. Yes, Ambassador. I think I'm beginning to understand what I've been missing. He looked around at the assembled crowd, alien observers documenting human behavior, military officers watching their colleagues' crisis of conscience, and the young Marine who continued his perfect vigil despite everything happening around him. I came here thinking this was about military protocol, Volkov said slowly, about proper chain of command and respect for authority. But it's not about that at all, is it? Commander Morrison shook her head. No, Colonel. It's about something much deeper than military hierarchy. It's about trust, Volkov continued, the pieces finally clicking into place. Every species in the galaxy is watching to see if humans can be trusted to keep their word, even when it's difficult or inconvenient. Even when our own officers try to break our commitments, he gestured toward Marcus. That guard isn't just honoring the dead. He's proving to everyone watching that humans will stick to their principles no matter what pressure is applied. He's demonstrating that we can be trusted. Observer Kryn stepped forward, her electronic voice carrying notes of approval. The Nixari Collective has reached preliminary conclusion. Human commitment to abstract principles may be unprecedented in galactic history. This behavior pattern suggests potential for unprecedented reliability in interspecies agreements. General Morrison nodded grimly. That's exactly right, Observer Kryn. Every time a human guard maintains their post despite distraction or pressure, we're proving that our species can be trusted with greater responsibilities. Dr. Hayes resumed her recording, sensing that the crucial moment was approaching. Colonel, you've reached a decision point that will be remembered in the historical record. How you handle this moment will influence how other species view humanity for generations to come. Volkov looked at his subordinates, who were watching him with mixtures of concern and hope. Major Petrov in particular seemed to be silently pleading with his commander to make the right choice. Major Petrov, Volkov said finally. Yes, sir? What do you think I should do? Petrov straightened, clearly not having expected to be asked for his opinion. Sir, I think your sister would want you to honor what that guard is doing. She died for the same principles he's protecting. Volkov nodded slowly. The weight of decision was heavy on his shoulders, but for the first time since entering the memorial hall, he knew what needed to be done. The moment of redemption was at hand. Colonel Viktor Volkov took a deep breath and stepped back from the tomb. When he spoke, his voice carried a gravity that hadn't been there before, the tone of a man who had finally understood something important. General Morrison, he said formally, I wish to withdraw my previous demand and issue a formal apology for my inappropriate behavior in this sacred space. The tension that had filled the memorial hall for the past hour began to ease, but nobody relaxed completely. This was still a crucial moment that would be remembered and analyzed for years to come. Private Chen, Volkov called out clearly. Marcus responded without moving from his position. Yes, sir? I owe you an apology, son. I failed to understand the significance of your duty, and I attempted to compromise your sacred obligation to honor the fallen. That was wrong of me, and I am sorry. For the first time in over 7 hours, Marcus allowed himself a slight nod of acknowledgement. Thank you, sir. Your apology is accepted. Volkov turned to address the alien observers directly. Ambassadors, observers, honored representatives, I hope you will report to your governments that what you witnessed here today was not representative of human military values. This young Marine demonstrated the true spirit of humanity, absolute commitment to duty, honor, and the protection of those who cannot protect themselves. Ambassador Thesh's scales shifted to a warm golden color, indicating deep respect. This one will report that human military discipline extends beyond personal authority to encompass sacred principles. The Keth Republic will view this as strong evidence of human reliability in future agreements. Observer Kryn's electronic voice carried harmonic undertones of approval. The Nixari Collective has updated assessment of human behavioral patterns. Prediction: humans will prove exceptional partners in maintaining galactic peace. Dr. Hayes continued recording, knowing she was witnessing a moment that would become a case study in diplomatic academies across human space. Colonel, would you be willing to share what changed your perspective? Volkov looked at the tomb again, watching his sister's name scroll past among thousands of others. I realized that I was thinking like an individual instead of thinking like a human. My sister died protecting people she had never met, people who couldn't protect themselves. That guard is honoring her sacrifice and the sacrifice of everyone whose name appears on this memorial. He paused, choosing his words carefully. More than that, he's proving to the galaxy that humans can be trusted to keep their word even when it's difficult. Every species represented here is watching to see if we really mean what we say about protecting the innocent and honoring our commitments. General Morrison stepped forward, her expression showing approval. Colonel, your recognition of these principles suggests you've learned something important today. However, there will still be formal consequences for your initial actions. Volkov nodded, accepting responsibility. I understand, ma'am. I'm prepared to face whatever disciplinary action is appropriate. You'll be required to attend a cultural sensitivity course and complete a detailed study of Memorial Guard protocols. The general continued. Additionally, you'll be writing a formal report on the importance of ceremonial duties for distribution throughout the Colonial Defense Force. Yes, ma'am. I'll ensure that other officers understand what I failed to grasp initially. Commander Morrison checked her chronometer. Private Chen, you have 15 minutes left on your watch. Are you able to complete your duty? Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied without hesitation. I am honor-bound to maintain my post until properly relieved. Major Petrov stepped forward, clearly proud of his commander's transformation. Sir, if I may, what should we tell the other conference attendees about what happened here? Volkov considered this carefully. Tell them the truth, Major. Tell them that a Russian colonel learned an important lesson about what it really means to serve humanity's interests instead of his own ego. The Memorial Hall had returned to its proper atmosphere of quiet reverence. The alien observers moved away respectfully, already composing reports for their home governments. Dr. Hayes concluded her recording, knowing she had captured something significant for the historical record. As the crowd dispersed, Volkov remained near the tomb, watching the name scroll past. When Elena's name appeared again, he whispered, I'm sorry, little sister. I forgot what you taught me about what really matters. General Morrison approached him one final time. Colonel, this incident will be noted in your record, but it will also show your ability to recognize your mistakes and learn from them. That's a valuable quality in a senior officer. Thank you, ma'am. I hope to prove worthy of that confidence. Exactly 15 minutes later, Sergeant Williams arrived to relieve Marcus. The changing of the guard was performed with precise military ceremony, each movement choreographed to honor the fallen. Marcus saluted the tomb, executed a perfect about-face, and marched away. His 8-hour duty completed, Sergeant Williams took his position and began his own vigil, as motionless and dedicated as his predecessor. The Eternal Watch continued, as it had every day for the past 50 years and would continue for generations to come. As Colonel Volkov finally left the Memorial Hall, he carried with him a new understanding of what it meant to be human, in a galaxy full of different species with different values. The lesson would stay with him for the rest of his career, influencing every decision he made and every order he gave. Behind him, the names continued their endless scroll across the tomb's surface, each one a reminder that some duties transcend rank, authority, and personal pride. The memorial stood as testament to humanity's greatest strength, the willingness to sacrifice for principles that protect everyone, regardless of species or origin. In the months that followed, the story of the Russian colonel and the tomb guard would spread throughout human space and beyond. It would become a teaching tool in military academies, a case study in diplomatic schools, and a reminder that humanity's true power lay not in their weapons or technology, but in their absolute commitment to protecting those who could not protect themselves. The Eternal Watch continued, and the galaxy took notice.